Cool. So this is an annotation of the poem Caged Bird. What you need to have in front of you or with you is a copy of the poem, easily accessible online or in a booklet, and ideally a pen to follow along. So what I aim to do is to read through each stanza and just kind of go through the language features used in a bit of a basic effect. So the idea is that you will take this forth, you'll annotate as we go, try and maybe guess some of the language features before I get the chance to go through them, and use this to form your own base notes in terms of the use of language features. All right, so starting through Caged Bird, Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. Okay, so going through this poem, you should be aware pretty quickly of a contrast between the free bird and the caged bird. So what you want to do is not just say that there's contrast, but think about how that's created. So it's created obviously through use of language and language features. So coming in straight away, a free bird is the adjective is free. Okay, so this is giving us a description from the outset, whereas comparatively the other one is a caged bird. So the next thing we want to take note of is use of verbs. So coming through, leaps is a verb, floats is a verb, dips is a verb, dares is a verb, and claim is a verb. So the use of these verbs is something to take note of. So the verbs that are used connotate, or the associations with them are freedom and movement, but positive movement, movement that comes from being sort of energetic or unrestricted would be a nice way of thinking about it. So the complete opposite of someone or something that is caged. So floats, dips, going along with that sort of free movement, positively connotated. Whereas if we come to the caged bird, we will find the same use of the same language feature having different connotations with it. The next verbs that I want to look at are these dares to claim the sky. So dares and claims, it's obviously the wider sentence is a metaphor because you cannot literally claim the sky. But the associations with this are ones of ownership, power, possession, perhaps with that idea of ownership or power or possession, just that they have the ability, they can claim the sky and they don't have to think about anything any other way. We want to think about the sense of the tone or mood. All right, so the tonal mood is obviously created through that use of verbs that were previously spoken about, but also things like the orange sun rays, so the adjectives that are used there, so that is orange. All right, so sort of a relaxed idea. If we're thinking about orange sun rays, we're thinking it's a nice clear day. It could be sunrise, sunset, just a really relaxed and easy feeling. Apologies for the handwriting. Relaxed, easy feeling. The other thing that I want to point out, which is appearing throughout the entire poem, is the lack of punctuation at the end of these sentences. So when we don't have a presence of punctuation at the end of the sentence, it's got a fancy term for it. Doesn't always in English. So this is called enjambment. So this helps to create a flow of sentences. So the presence or lack of punctuation is always something you can talk about or think about. So worth keeping in mind for this poem, future poems, study of unseen texts. In contrast, we have a use of a full stop here. So what I would like to point out is that obviously we have this free bird, this caged bird, that sort of situation, but there is a separation between them, and by using that full stop, it's creating a clear separation between them because it's got a full stop. All right, we'll come into the next stanza. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. So straight away we're getting a contrast. So but is a conjunction, so it's making us think that there is something more to come. Going back to conjunction, which is like a joining word, we've got them with and. But here it helps to create a sense of listing. So all these beautiful free things this bird can do, it does this and this and this, just to make things complicated. So, but a bird that stalks, so we're coming back to our verbs here, stalks being a verb, clipped and tied are adjectives in this sentence. Yeah, so stalks just straight away compares to the idea that we have of leaping. It's kind of the complete sort of opposite, so that's another use of verb. Narrow cage, it's not just any cage, it is narrow. So this is kind of contrasting to the freeness that we have of the sky, a nice orange sky with orange sun rays, but here the use of adjective gives something different. And then coming through for adjectives as well, clipped and tied in this sentence are adjectives, or this stanza context. Bars of rage is a metaphor. You cannot literally have bars of rage. The next bit I want to point out was the use of repetition. So this is called repetition. Obviously, it's repeated. There is a particular special term of it, which is called anaphora. So if you want to sound super sophisticated and smart, you would call it anaphora. This helps to create a sense of building, emphasis. You could say it's almost listing in the same way. So much like the repetition of and in this first stanza creates a building or a listing, his listing's different. It's negative, obviously. So quite different. So when we look at the idea that he has his bars of rage, they are what he owns. He owns bars of rage. He doesn't claim the sky. He has bars of rage. So for his metaphor, his possession or ownership is of something negative. It's not free. It's not really something that you want to own, and yet he has it. The other aspect that I wanted to point out was the use of so. So this is another conjunction. If you don't know that these are conjunctions or what part of speech these are, that's okay. You use them so much in everyday speech that you sort of forget that they have certain names for them or what they are. So it's a conjunction. You can look things up. That's A-okay. Look them up before exams. So the use of the conjunction so in this sentence, it's almost like therefore, or because of. So for me, this makes me think that because his feet are tied and his wings are clipped, and he's got bars of rage and he's angry, that's why he opens his throat. So as a result of that, he opens his throat. So I think that kind of gives me, personally, this idea perhaps of hope. So because of the bad times, because of the inequality, he went forth and had hope. Cool. Next one. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So you're obviously noticing rhyme here. I'm not great at explaining the effect of rhyme, but we do have rhyme. I guess it sort of makes it kind of lulls into security, maybe? It just makes it like plod along nicely, which is kind of contrasting to the actual slightly depressing message. So the caged bird, we've given a name now. He's not just a bird that stalks and is raged and so forth. He is caged. So we're getting the adjective here for him. He doesn't get it till later, not as important. He's not as important as the free bird. So trill is a noun. It is a thing that you do or have. So it's a song. Fearful is an adjective. Right. So what you want to be doing is kind of making a list almost of use of adjectives that are describing the free bird, use of adjectives that are describing the caged bird, and then comparing them directly or contrasting them directly. So I think that you can have the idea that there is something unknown but you still long for it is a paradox. or a contradiction, which is also known as, and I think this is a wonderful language feature, an oxymoron. The caged bird sings of freedom. So once again, the use of conjunctions is quite interesting. So if you're not understanding this use of conjunctions, that's fine. I guess it's perhaps slightly pedantic. You focus on the adjectives, you can focus on the verbs, metaphors, some of those more simplistic ones. But the use of conjunction there, so for the caged bird sings of freedom. So once again, I think it fits with that idea that it's because of this confinement, they sing for freedom. So also the idea I wanted to talk about was the use of diction here. So the word choice, or the fact that it is a distant hill. So that is, I think, an adjective. Distant would be describing. You might want to check that one. Once again, not the source of all knowledge when it comes to language features. But I think the fact that it is on a distant hill, but then it's also still heard, is kind of gives the idea of hope. So it doesn't matter that it's far away because it's still there, it's being listened to, it's being heard, it's worth the song. So if we're thinking about this in the context of African American civil rights, it's kind of the idea that, yes, it seems hopeless at times and there were so many people fighting for it, but it's worth it because there's hope in the long term, in the future, this won't happen. And that's what they're kind of looking for. Maybe if not now, at least for their future generations, perhaps the future birds of this world, caged or free. So those are the ones I wanted from that stanza there. So this next one here depends on your copy of it. So in the copies of Caged Bird that I've come across, these two are separate. In some, they are joined together, which would kind of point out it doesn't fit with the punctuation of the previous one. I'm going to go with them separate because I personally like the idea that these two birds are kept separate. I think that adds to the significance and meaning of it. But that's up to you. I think because they're not kept together, that's a significant thing. They're separate, their lives are separate, they're kept separately. Their issues, or the issues of the caged bird, aren't tainting the free bird. Cool. So the free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. So we're getting that same tone in there. It's relaxed. It's easy. He isn't aware of any prejudice that's going on elsewhere. There was Dr. Michael Kimmel gave a talk, and he sort of talked about how you're blind to your own prejudice. You don't, your own prejudice, your own privilege. You're blind to your own privilege. You don't realize the suffering that goes on when you're not somebody that has to experience it, obviously. So the free bird, all he's thinking of, say bird, all he's thinking of is yet another breeze. So he doesn't have to think about suffering because he's just thinking about being a bird. So the adjective, another, is an adjective in this context. You may want to check that, but that is what I had thought. So for me, the adjective there sort of implies multiple. So they're waiting for another breeze. They've got so many breezes they can enjoy. It doesn't matter. They're just waiting for another. It's standard, it's just another breeze on another day being a lovely free bird. They've got many. They've got a collection of breezes that they've had the joy of experiencing, while the caged bird has none of these things. Once again, got some of this bad boy. So try and think to yourself, or go back to your notes. What's it called when we repeat at the beginning of a sentence? Is anaphora. Once again, creates that listing, building, emphasis kind of thing. Yeah, there one's and I think that has more of a listing effect than just having his is building from stanza 2. Whereas and it's more. I think that just reinforces the idea that this bird has everything. Trade winds refer to a warm wind. Helps to keep that same tone that we've got going on there. Soft. Once Nice, sort of fits in there. That's an adjective. Through the sighing trees, personification. Sighing kind of implies that they've got this nice gentle wind from this beautiful trade wind that's easy breezy, it's relaxed. Fat worms, they're not just any worms, they don't have to have the worst, they have the best worms for the bird, waiting on a dawn bright lawn. Oh, it's just so beautiful, dawn bright. So I guess when they talked about the orange rays, it is the sunrise in the morning, and he names the sky his own. He hasn't just had to claim it, he's now able to name it. Because he has that much power, that much ownership. You've got to keep imagining this, not just in its own concept, but also in relation to the caged bird and the experiences that they're having. Cool, but once again, our conjunction sort of forces us into this other world. It's quite a harsh shift. So this creates a shift. It reminds us that there is other experiences out there. Sorry, this pen and my handwriting is horrific. They stand on the grave of dreams, the bars of rage, the grave of dreams. Their metaphor is terrible. He doesn't get to name a sky. He doesn't get to claim a name. He gets to have terrible, terrible things. Grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. So shadow shouts. I don't know if that counts as sibilance, because sibilance tends to be a his sound. Shadow shouts. Call alliteration. You look that up. You figure that one out. Nightmare scream. I figured that was a metaphor, maybe. I know I should know everything, but I don't. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Repetition of that same thing from earlier. And once again, so he opens his throat to sing. He's got all this terrible stuff going on, and because of that, he opens his throat to sing. I think the use of conjunctions is really nice. It's not the same effect every time they use it, but it's worth forming some notes on. And then, once again, we haven't just repeated one line, we've repeated the whole shebang here. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but long for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So I think by repeating that, I think it reinforces, personally, you can disagree, but I think it reinforces that idea of hope. Because of all this, he goes forth and he does this. We've got, if we look through, we've got, happy, happy, terrible, terrible, happy, terrible. But it's just reminding us that there is hope. It can happen again. They can be heard. They can have this. I feel like if we finished perhaps on that note of, maybe that they're opening their throat to sing, that's, got hope. But I think by reinforcing it with a whole other repetition of a whole new stanza has that effect so much more. When we're looking at structure and the shifts that we have between the free bird and the caged bird, I think it's worth considering why bother having that contrast? Why do we need to know the experience of the free bird to appreciate the constraints and confinement of the caged bird? Why not just have an entire poem? It's called Caged Bird. It's about the caged bird. That's who we're meant to be focusing on. That's who most of the stanzas are written about. So, I think that's a question to ask yourself, why we need to have the experience of the free bird. Is it so that those who read it, who are the free bird, initially start off thinking, hey, this is about me. God, a lovely bird. Wow, cool. Look at that free bird having a nice time. Do we need to see the experiences of others? Do we need to contrast that? That's up to you. Have a think. Build on these notes. Come back to this video, come back to your own notes, and hopefully there will be more. Ta-da!